I'm going to show you two photographs in a second. One is classical contemplative landscape study, the kind of picture that I hope rewards a little bit of time spent with it, a little bit of time absorbing the story, finding your way through the photograph. The other one is a much more modern looking photograph. It's an architectural photograph, it's very high contrast, and is much more of the modern social media style. It is designed to grab your attention. And I took both photographs, and I wanted to explore the gap between the two of them, particularly in view of the fact that I have taken 6 months off social media. I haven't looked at Instagram or Threads. In fact, I cancelled my accounts on both of those platforms 6 months ago. And I think that my photography has improved. And I wanted to have a look at the reasons for that. I wanted to look at the opportunities and the disadvantages of social media, and really just to sort of have an awareness of perhaps the hidden costs of social media, and how we can, moving forward, how we can balance photography that is properly connected to us, how we can develop a photography career, and I mean that in the sense of having a long-term attachment to photography, progressing in your photography, moving on with your photography, not necessarily making a paid career out of it. So this applies to all people who take photography seriously. All right, let's get into it. So what I found in my commercial work was that as I started to pursue more trendy, more sort of social media style, Instagram-driven photography, it made me more incoherent, effectively. There was a fracturing, a stylistic fracturing, and we started trend hopping, and I found myself becoming increasingly disconnected from the photography. The incoherence trap is absolutely inevitable. As soon as you start using a medium that is as dynamic as Instagram as a source of inspiration, you will find yourself producing work that looks very, very different over a period of time. And it requires fantastic sort of strength of character and will to ignore these trends and stop them creeping into your photography. So in landscape photography, everything becomes epic. Epic is the buzzword, and that's what you'll find on Instagram, as opposed to the more reflective, contemplative style. In terms of architecture, you find bizarre angles, very high contrast, black and white, as opposed to a more faithful architectural style. And this leads to, inevitably, to a completely incoherent feed. What do I mean by the consumption crisis? Well, social media has changed, for the better or the worse, the way that we consume photographs. So if you look at the old-fashioned model before social media, you would procure a magazine. You'd get up, you'd go down to the newsagent, you'd buy the magazine, you'd come back, make yourself a cup of tea, get a biscuit, and you'd spend a happy hour scrolling through the pictures. Did I say scrolling? You'd spend a happy hour browsing, going through the pictures, and it was a contemplative and rewarding pastime. The model of social media is for advertising to be sold, and so there is an imperative in social media to keep you on the page and to keep you scrolling. That way they can show you more and more advertisements. That's it. They're not particularly interested in the quality of photography, and they're not interested in your development as a photography either. Social media is not for our benefit. It's for the benefit of the platform, ultimately of the benefit of the owner of the platform. So what we're finding is, with the increased accessibility, everybody is uploading photographs from their mobile phones, from their cameras. You've got professional photographers looking to get a piece of the pie. You've got an absolute avalanche of photography. And so the behavior is that you scroll through the feed. And so there is an imperative to produce more arresting work. As a photographer, I don't want you to scroll past my photograph. I want you to be scrolling and stop and go, wow, that's excellent. And this has really started to determine our behavior as photographers. We are turning into Instagram shooters if we don't watch ourselves. The fundamental shift here is moving from the contemplative style, as I keep calling it, towards shock value, instant impact. And personally, I don't think that's particularly healthy, but I acknowledge that it has created opportunities. So there's a real duality at play here. And so I quit social media. A little bit of an extreme reaction, and I didn't quit it completely, but what I did was I substituted out my Instagram account and my Threads account, cancelled both of them, and I opened accounts in the Fediverse on Mastodon and on PixelFed. And there's a huge difference, because the Mastodon and PixelFed are not algorithm driven. It's simply what's the latest thing in the feed and from the people that you follow. So there was much more, much less pressure, much less churn. You put a photograph out, people comment if they like it, they don't comment if they don't like it. There's no pressure to amass likes. There's none of the, post it on Instagram, go back 15 minutes later to see if anyone's noticed it. There's absolutely no sort of competitive element. And what you do is you find yourself naturally building a community around you that is interested in the stuff that you're doing, and you're interested in the stuff that they're doing. And it's a bit like making a friendship. The Fediverse, I think, is much more healthy psychologically. I think the danger, if you like, the trap that we fall into with algorithm-driven social media is that we frankly start behaving like hamsters on methadone. It's round and round that loop, and round we go. And it gets ever more frantic, and this is not good. Personally, is certainly not good for my mental health, and I suggest that it's probably not good for anybody's mental health. So a surprising thing happened. I found that I became a lot more connected to my photography. I was able to recapture the goals, to get in contact again with the goals that I had set myself when I set out on this journey sort of 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And it all started to make sense again, and I started to, it's perhaps too much to say I started to enjoy my photography again, because I've always enjoyed my photography. If it's not the creative challenge, it's the technical challenge. It's learning new things. It's getting out there in the open air, walking. There's a whole host of things to enjoy about photography. So I won't say that I lost my like or enjoyment of photography. I didn't, but I find it much healthier personally to do this without being reliant or hooked on social media. I was able to return to a purely craft-driven approach. And this had some immediate benefits. I found I had more room to breathe, time to breathe. I could take my time over the photography. There were lots of getting connected, and the bits started to fall into place again. And some of the specifics of this, so it was in this period that I developed the most of my thinking around the deliberate photography that I discussed in last week's video, in fact. A lot of that came into focus, to use a phrase. Some specifics had happened. So the benefits of having more time, devoting more time, not being so pressured. I started to look for more, instead of looking for the shot all the time, I started looking for possibilities, and I started framing for possibilities as well, if that makes sense. So the practice of shooting the photographs with the camera became much more connected to the edit, because for me editing is very important. I've not signed up to the get it right in camera thing. I believe you should get it as right as you can in camera, but there are so many factors militating against that thing being a truism. It isn't. That you can do a lot in processing, from correction to enhancement to helping the photograph tell the story that you want it to tell. And I was on doing a workshop with somebody last week, and they made a very insightful comment, which I thought was what they wanted to move to, was taking the photograph they see rather than recording the landscape that they see. And there's a huge, huge difference, because what you're actually doing is taking a photograph and you're creating that story. It's the way that it makes you feel that you want to capture. And that is absolutely tied into editing. So the connection between shooting and editing became much more obvious to me. It wasn't a case of like you do one thing and then you do another. It's actually a continuum. It's part of a completely continuous process, and that also extended backwards. So I found myself doing the pre-shoot work much more thoroughly, assessing the scene much better. In terms of architecture, I found myself looking for different types of shots much more deliberately. So in both architecture and landscape, it's a matter of getting the context, getting the wide shots, getting the detailed shots. So in landscape, sometimes it's getting the detailed shots, and you can go all the way down to macro in that. But it's a case of working the scene, and this was a theme that I spoke about in my video last week. And that became much more natural, much more tied in. So it was an interesting thing about it, was that this working the scene mentality was something that very much came with working as a professional photographer, working as a commercial photographer. You knew that you had to get results. And the way that I evolved to do that was really to work the scene, get every angle, make sure there was nothing left to chance, and don't rely on that feeling that you have when you think this is the one, this is the competition winner, this is the one that's going to make the client happy. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but we digress. So what I'm talking about is a lot of this mentality started to make sense and become a much more organically sound and complete way of working, and this ties in directly with my deliberate photography stuff. So the way I approach a shoot these days, or almost every shoot, whether it's commercial or whether it's for my own purposes, is now broadly similar. So I will have a preparation phase, choose the equipment, work with a sense of creating opportunity. So whilst taking less equipment, if that makes sense. But you kind of know what the possibilities are, and it's about assessing the possibilities in a shoot and being equipped to take advantage of those opportunities should they come. So that addresses the equipment. On arrival at the shoot, it's about assessing what you actually have in front of you, which is always a very different thing from the thing that the art director says you're going to have in front of you, or what you might expect in your mind when you're going out on a mountain shoot to new territory. So it's not about taking photographs, it's about wandering about and assessing the area and having a good look. And you can do this fast, you can do it slowly, it doesn't really matter. You develop an eye for seeing the potential shots. This doesn't have to be a painstaking process using up half your morning. This is generally quite a quick thing, but I tend to do this now without the camera. I'll wander about, have a really good look and assess the possibilities. Then it's about shooting. It's about shooting with intent and purpose. It's deliberate shooting. It's working through the possibilities that you've already determined, and you're very purposeful about this. And shooting for the edit, as I mentioned in the last section. So there's a slightly different approach to shooting, and this is most clearly obvious in the sense of creating things like panoramas, where you're actually shooting multiple shots. But it's also shooting with the purpose of creating a story, and of whether that story is an article on the blog or whatever it happens to be. It might be an article that you submit to a magazine. It's about getting the shots that cover the story. So it's the context, it's the mid shots, it's the detail, and finally the edit. This works in an identical way in landscape photography and in architecture. So in landscape photography, it's about assessing the vantage points, the different views. In architecture, it's about assessing the way that you're going to get the context shoot shots of the entire building, if that's possible, or the bits that you're particularly interested in. And then it's forming the abstracts or creating the abstracts, the high contrast black and white shots that we know do well on social media, that are very arresting and eye-catching. So this is not incompatible with social media. This is absolutely compatible with social media. It's simply about dividing your time up appropriately and making sure that you're covering all the bases. It's not impossible to balance looking after yourself with the demands of what I call commercial social media. There are definitely opportunities associated with social media, so it's foolish to throw it all out, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the way of achieving this balance is to really attach some importance to your own personal work over the work that you do for social media. So I'm broadly categorizing this as stuff that I do for me and stuff that I do for somebody else, whether that is a client or whether it's social media. There's a definite blurring between those two things. But I think for any photographer, if you want to build a reputation, you need to be present, and you need to be perceived as having a style and having something that can be attached to you. And part of that is about prioritizing quality over quantity. Trend hopping is not going to do it. Be more analytical, work out what it is that makes things work for people and translate that, if you can, into something that suits your own style of photography. It's also about community building. So communities are tremendously powerful, and all the way through my career, in the music business as well as in photography, I always had people rooting for me, and I rooted for people. It's a mutually beneficial situation, but you need to build a community around you. You cannot operate as a lone wolf these days. You absolutely need to have referrals. You need to have people, sending links to your work to other people. You need to be recommended, and it's personal recommendation that is the most effective recommendation, if that's in generating sales or simply generating reputation. You need to build that community. Now, the key to this is, I think, in retaining long-term thinking. And this is very much, the trap that I fell into, certainly with social media way back when, was that my long-term thinking disappeared completely, and you become a channel-hopping slave to the algorithm, or you become a trend-hopping slave to the algorithm, and it doesn't work. So I think retaining a sensibility of what your long-term goals are, concentrating on producing real quality and making sure that that is represented in your social, in your commercial work. I've developed a practical strategy for achieving this. It's about curated posting. So I will absolutely make sure that my quality work is represented in my posting these days. Whether it draws as many likes or interactions, it doesn't matter. The point is that I'm building up, slowly but surely, a body of work that represents me, that's truthful to me. And I would suggest that you should all be doing this. Take your photography seriously and build a portrayal of that photography through social media in a sense that really reflects your values. As well as the curated posting on commercial social media, on all social media, I now start to include behind the scenes stuff, informal snaps, the breakfast that I had while I was waiting for clients to arrive on a shoot. That type of footage, it gives a glimpse of what's going on. It gives a glimpse of something real that is not polished to an inch of perfection. And I think that's really important these days, because what people are looking for is connection. It's not perfection. It's connection over perfection every time. And I've hinted a little bit about platform diversification. I don't think it's realistic to be here, there and everywhere. In terms of social media, what I think it boils down to is you need your website, which is your central representation of you. It is your work, this is where it lives, and hopefully this is where the contacts will come to or from. But you need your shop windows, and social media is very much shop windows. So I think that it's realistic because if you don't post regularly on social media, tumbleweed. So it is necessary to do that. So I think for me, it comes down to identifying the platforms that make most sense for me. And I'm going to do an experiment now for the next 6 months of cultivating my threads and my Instagram feeds along the lines that I'm recommending, because I do think it works. And so I'll be doing that in addition to the platforms that feel more natural to me, which are Mastodon and Pixel Fed. Okay, so that's my thinking about how you balance these demands and how you include social media in your practice. So what's the way forward? For me, with my landscape photography, it's about including patient observation, prioritizing patient observation over epic. I think that's important. For architecture, it's less about architectural porn, more about trying to identify really what the architect was thinking. It's more about tapping into the creative flow behind the building. For architecture, it's very much about focusing on form and space. Also, I mean, architecture porn has its place, it's absolutely for sure. I mean, I do like these high contrast black and white images, the abstracts particularly. For all of us, I think we all need probably reminding to pay attention to your internal creative monologue. Over and above external validation. So let's get free of slavishly following the likes and the subscribers. It's more about, is this working for me? Is it working for other people as well? Of course, is important, but it's not about numbers of likes and subscribers. It's about the way that people relate to one another. So for me, it's very much about retaining what I describe as an anchored approach. It's about retaining my original motivations, my original aspirations, and it's about pursuing that craft-based approach over everything else. Yeah, try these things and see how you get on. Take a month off social media if you can bear it. Photograph for yourself. And photograph something that was meaningful to you. And if it doesn't work, photograph it again. Push the envelope, push your skills, get out of your comfort zone and, you know, do stuff for you that is going to move yourself along the path as a photographer. I think it's helpful every shoot that you do, make one photograph for you. Make a point of it. Build it into the schedule. You know, don't let anyone pressurize you to do one more shot. You know, do the shot for you. It's important. And retain a sense of, make a picture that's going to be important in 10 years' time. When you look back at all of this, there will be a flood of photographs that will be utterly meaningless to you. And I'm not saying that all of those photographs are all to do with social media, far from it. Some of the social media pictures will be intensely meaningful too. But I think it's important to remind ourselves that this is a long-term endeavour. It's not a short-term endeavour. Overnight success doesn't last. Overnight success really, for me, is not worth striving for. Let's develop art that matters.